In 2017, the Pentagon did something unprecedented. They admitted UFOs are real. After 70 years of denial, dismissal, and ridicule, they released videos of Navy pilots encountering objects that defy the laws of physics. Craft that accelerate instantly to hypersonic speeds. Objects that hover motionless against hurricane-force winds. Technology that makes our most advanced aircraft look like toys from the Stone Age. But this wasn't new. The government has known since 1947. Project Blue Book's 12,618 classified cases prove it. Tonight, we're opening those files. The story begins on June 24th, 1947, when private pilot Kenneth Arnold was flying near Mount Rainier in Washington state. What he saw that afternoon would change human history forever. 9 disc-shaped objects moving at impossible speeds, skipping across the sky, like saucers skipping on water. When Arnold reported his sighting to the press, a journalist coined the term flying saucer, and the modern UFO phenomenon was born. But Arnold's sighting was just the beginning. Within weeks, hundreds of similar reports flooded into military bases across the United States. Pilots, police officers, military personnel, credible witnesses describing craft that couldn't possibly exist according to known physics. On July 8, 1947, the situation reached a critical point when the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release stating they had recovered a flying disc from a ranch in New Mexico. The Roswell press release caused immediate panic in Washington. Within hours, the story was changed. It wasn't a flying disc, it was just a weather balloon. The debris was displayed for photographers, showing torn rubber and wooden sticks. Case closed, except it wasn't. The declassified Project Blue Book files contain multiple reports from military personnel who handled the actual debris and described materials that didn't match any known technology, metal that couldn't be cut, burned, or deformed, and that returned to its original shape after being crumpled. So, the Roswell incident forced the military to confront an uncomfortable reality. Something was in American airspace, and they had no idea what it was or where it came from. This was unacceptable during the early Cold War, when the Soviet threat dominated every strategic calculation. If these objects were Soviet aircraft using revolutionary technology, America needed to know. If they were something else, America needed to know that too. And most importantly, the public needed to be kept calm. In September 1947, just 2 months after Roswell, the Air Force established Project Sign, the first official government program to investigate UFO sightings. The project's classified mission was straightforward: determine whether these objects represented a threat to national security, and more specifically, whether they were advanced Soviet technology. But Project Sign quickly ran into a problem. The more they investigated, the more convinced they became that these objects were not Soviet. They were too advanced, too widespread, and frankly, too bizarre. By 1948, Project Sign's investigators had come to a shocking conclusion, documented in what became known as the estimate of the situation. This classified document, reviewed by Air Force Chief of Staff General Hoyt Vandenberg, argued that UFOs were extraterrestrial in origin. Vandenberg rejected the estimate and ordered all copies destroyed. The message was clear. The government would not officially acknowledge the possibility of extraterrestrial visitation, no matter what the evidence showed. Project Sign was reorganized and renamed Project Grudge in 1949, with a new mandate: debunk UFO sightings and reduce public interest in the phenomenon. This wasn't about finding the truth anymore. It was about managing public perception. But even Project Grudge couldn't contain the flood of credible sightings from military personnel, commercial pilots, and other reliable witnesses. Something more sophisticated was needed. In 1952, Project Blue Book was born. Named after the blue folders used to store exam booklets at various universities, it would become the longest-running and most extensive government UFO investigation program in history, operating from 1952 to 1969. The project was headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, and its stated mission was to determine if UFOs were a threat to national security and to scientifically analyze UFO-related data. The man chosen to lead Project Blue Book's scientific investigation was Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an astronomy professor from Northwestern University. Hynek was a skeptic who initially believed all UFO sightings could be explained by misidentified conventional objects, atmospheric phenomena, or hallucinations. He expected to spend a few months debunking sightings and then return to his academic career. Instead, he would spend the next 20 years investigating the most perplexing mystery of the modern age. Hynek's transformation from skeptic to believer happened gradually as he investigated case after case that defied conventional explanation. He interviewed Air Force pilots who chased objects that accelerated to impossible speeds. He examined radar data showing craft that made right-angle turns at velocities that would pulverize any human pilot. He spoke with entire communities who witnessed the same structured craft hovering for hours. The more he investigated, the more convinced he became that something extraordinary was happening. One of the most significant cases that changed Hynek's perspective occurred in 1952, during what became known as the Washington, D.C. UFO incident. On 2 consecutive weekends in July, multiple unidentified objects appeared on radar screens at Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base. The objects were also seen visually by pilots and ground personnel. F-94 interceptor jets were scrambled to investigate, but every time they approached, the objects would accelerate away at speeds the jets couldn't match. The Washington incidents caused genuine panic in the military and government. These objects had appeared over the nation's capital, demonstrating complete air superiority. If they were hostile, there was nothing the military could do to stop them. President Truman demanded answers. The Air Force held the largest press conference since World War II to address the sightings. The official explanation, temperature inversions causing false radar returns, satisfied the press but not the radar operators who knew their equipment and understood that temperature inversions didn't appear as solid objects on multiple independent radar systems simultaneously. The Washington, D.C. incidents revealed Project Blue Book's real purpose. While the project was presented to the public as a serious scientific investigation, its actual function was to provide plausible explanations for UFO sightings that would satisfy the media and reduce public concern. Hynek found himself caught between his scientific integrity and pressure from Air Force officers who wanted every case closed with a conventional explanation, no matter how implausible. The Air Force's approach to UFO investigation followed a predictable pattern. When a sighting was reported, Project Blue Book would send investigators to interview witnesses and examine physical evidence. If the case could be explained as a misidentified aircraft, planet, or weather phenomenon, it would be closed as identified. If no conventional explanation was obvious, investigators would stretch logic to find one anyway. Venus, swamp gas, weather balloons, temperature inversions. These became running jokes among serious researchers who saw them deployed to explain sightings that clearly didn't fit these categories, but some cases couldn't be dismissed so easily. These were classified as unidentified, sightings that remained unexplained even after thorough investigation. By the time Project Blue Book closed in 1969, it had investigated 12,618 cases. Of these, 701 remained officially unidentified. However, the declassified files reveal that many more cases probably belonged in the unidentified category, but were force-fit into conventional explanations to keep the numbers down. One of these truly unexplainable cases occurred in 1964 near Socorro, New Mexico. Police officer Lonnie Zamora was chasing a speeding car when he heard a roar and saw a flame in the sky. He drove toward the sound and encountered an egg-shaped craft sitting on metal legs in an arroyo. 2 small figures in white coveralls were visible near the craft. When Zamora approached, the beings entered the craft, which took off with a deafening roar, leaving burn marks on the ground, and depressed marks where the landing legs had been. The Socorro case was investigated extensively by Project Blue Book, the FBI, and military intelligence. The physical evidence, burn marks, landing traces, metal fragments, was undeniable. Zamora was a respected police officer with no history of making false reports or seeking attention. Hynek personally investigated the case and concluded it was genuine. Yet the Air Force's official explanation was that Zamora had seen an experimental lunar lander being tested in the area. This explanation ignored the fact that no such tests were being conducted, and no lunar lander design matched Zamora's description. As Hynek investigated more cases like Socorro, he began to recognize patterns. Many credible UFO sightings involved craft that seemed to be engaged in systematic observation, hovering over military bases, following aircraft, appearing near nuclear facilities. The objects demonstrated capabilities that suggested intelligent control and purpose. They weren't random atmospheric phenomena or misidentified conventional objects. They were something else entirely. Hynek also noticed that the most credible and well-documented cases were the ones most aggressively debunked by Air Force officials. It was as if there were two levels of Project Blue Book: the public-facing investigation that explained away everything, and a classified level where the truly disturbing cases were being studied by people with much higher security clearances than Hynek had. This suspicion was confirmed in the declassified files. While Project Blue Book was explaining away sightings to the public, other government agencies were conducting serious classified studies of the UFO phenomenon. The CIA had its own UFO investigation panel. The NSA was collecting signals intelligence related to UFO sightings. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations was interviewing witnesses who reported close encounters with craft and beings. There was a parallel investigation happening in the classified world, and Project Blue Book was essentially its public relations arm. One of the most explosive revelations in the declassified files involves the Robertson Panel, a secret CIA meeting held in 1953. The panel brought together top scientists to evaluate the UFO phenomenon and make recommendations. Their conclusion wasn't about whether UFOs were real. They seemed to accept that something anomalous was happening. Instead, they focused on the threat posed by public interest in UFOs. They recommended a debunking campaign to reduce public curiosity about the phenomenon, arguing that widespread UFO belief could be exploited by enemies to cause mass panic or confusion. The Robertson Panel's recommendations became the blueprint for how the government would handle UFOs for the next several decades. Rather than openly investigating the phenomenon and sharing findings with the public, the strategy would be ridicule, dismissal, and disinformation. Scientists who took UFOs seriously would be professionally marginalized. Military personnel who reported sightings would be discouraged from talking publicly. The media would be encouraged to present UFO believers as cranks and conspiracy theorists. This strategy was remarkably effective. By the 1960s, reporting a UFO sighting was social suicide for anyone with a professional reputation to protect. Pilots knew that reporting a UFO could end their career. Scientists knew that studying UFOs would destroy their credibility. Politicians learned that taking UFOs seriously would make them a laughingstock. The ridicule factor became a self-enforcing silence that kept credible witnesses from coming forward. Yet the sightings continued. In 1967, a series of UFO encounters in Michigan attracted massive media attention. Hundreds of witnesses reported seeing glowing objects hovering over swamps and lakes. When Hynek was sent to investigate, he felt enormous pressure from Air Force superiors to provide a simple explanation. In a press conference that would haunt him for the rest of his life, Hynek suggested that some of the sightings might have been swamp gas, methane released from decaying organic matter. The explanation was technically possible, but it didn't fit the evidence, and Hynek knew it. The swamp gas explanation became a punchline, damaging both Hynek's credibility and Project Blue Book's reputation. It was the beginning of the end for the project. By the late 1960s, Project Blue Book had become a liability rather than an asset. It was consuming resources while producing nothing but controversy. The Air Force commissioned the Condon Report, an ostensibly independent scientific study of UFOs conducted by the University of Colorado, hoping it would provide justification for ending the program. The Condon Report, released in 1969, concluded that further study of UFOs was not justified and that the phenomenon did not warrant scientific attention. However, the declassified files reveal that the Condon Report was biased from the start. Internal memos show that the project director had decided UFOs weren't worth studying before the investigation even began. Scientists involved in the project later revealed that contrary evidence was suppressed and that the final report misrepresented the actual findings. Using the Condon Report as justification, the Air Force officially closed Project Blue Book in 1969. The announcement stated that after 22 years of investigation, the Air Force had found no evidence that UFOs represented a threat to national security or that they were extraterrestrial in origin. Case closed. The public was told that the government was no longer investigating UFOs. This was a lie. The declassified files reveal that UFO investigations continued after Project Blue Book closed. They just went deeper into classification. Various military and intelligence agencies maintained their own UFO investigation programs with names like Project Moondust and Operation Blue Fly. These programs focused on retrieving objects of unknown origin and investigating cases involving military encounters with UFOs. They operated in complete secrecy with compartmentalized access. Meanwhile, Dr. Hynek underwent a remarkable transformation. After Project Blue Book closed, he founded the Center for UFO Studies and became the world's most prominent scientific advocate for serious UFO research. He developed a classification system for UFO encounters that is still used today. More importantly, he began speaking openly about his experiences with Project Blue Book, revealing how the Air Force had pressured him to provide conventional explanations for cases he knew were genuinely anomalous. In the final years of his life, Hynek became increasingly convinced that the government was engaged in a massive cover-up of UFO evidence. He spoke about cases that had been classified at levels above his clearance, suggesting that Project Blue Book had only seen the tip of the iceberg. When he died in 1986, many believed he had been on the verge of revealing information that would have changed everything. The question of what the government really knows about UFOs remained mostly speculation until 2017, when everything changed. The New York Times published a bombshell article revealing that the Pentagon had operated a secret UFO investigation program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program from 2007 to 2012. The article included videos captured by Navy FA-18 fighters showing objects performing maneuvers that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The most famous of these videos shows an object dubbed the Tic Tac because of its shape. The object was encountered by Navy pilots from the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz off the coast of California in 2004. Multiple pilots and radar operators witnessed the object over several days. It would drop from 80,000 feet to sea level in seconds, hover motionless, then accelerate to hypersonic speeds instantly. When pilots tried to intercept it, the object would anticipate their movements and position itself at their predetermined rendezvous point before they arrived. Commander David Fravor, one of the pilots who encountered the Tic Tac object, has spoken extensively about the incident. He describes technology that was decades, perhaps centuries, beyond anything currently known to exist. The object had no visible propulsion system, no wings, no exhaust. It moved in ways that would generate G-forces that would kill any biological pilot. Yet it clearly demonstrated intelligent control, responding to the Navy pilot's movements and seeming to play with them before accelerating away at impossible speeds. The Pentagon's admission in 2017 vindicated everyone who had insisted for decades that UFOs represented something real and unexplained. The ridicule factor that had silenced witnesses for so long began to evaporate. Senior military personnel started speaking openly about their UFO encounters. Former government officials began admitting that UFOs had been taken seriously at the highest levels despite public denials. In 2020, the Pentagon officially released the Navy videos and acknowledged they showed unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPS, the new preferred term for UFOs. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary assessment on UAPs that acknowledged 144 encounters between military aircraft and unidentified objects between 2004 and 2021. The report concluded that most of these encounters represented something physical and real, but that current data was insufficient to determine what they were. This brings us back to Project Blue Book and what those declassified files really tell us. The 12,618 cases investigated between 1952 and 1969 represent just a fraction of the total UFO encounters involving government and military personnel. Many cases were never reported because of the career consequences. Others were investigated by classified programs that never became part of Blue Book's official record. The 701 unidentified cases are almost certainly a dramatic undercount of truly anomalous encounters. What the Project Blue Book files prove beyond doubt is that the government has known for over 70 years that something extraordinary is happening in our skies. Objects displaying technology far beyond our current capabilities are regularly encountered by military personnel. These objects demonstrate intelligent control and sometimes seem to be monitoring human activities, particularly military operations and nuclear facilities. They pose no apparent threat, but they also don't make contact or reveal their purpose. The implications are staggering. If these objects are extraterrestrial, we are not alone in the universe, and we are being observed by civilizations with technology that makes ours look primitive. If they're not extraterrestrial, then someone on Earth has possessed revolutionary technology for decades, while the rest of humanity struggles with fossil fuels and conventional physics. Either explanation fundamentally changes our understanding of reality. The government's decades-long cover-up of UFO evidence represents one of the most significant betrayals of public trust in modern history. While citizens were told that UFOs were nonsense and that anyone who believed in them was a fool, military and intelligence agencies knew that something extraordinary was happening. They studied it, documented it, and kept it classified. The ridicule campaign destroyed careers and silenced witnesses who tried to tell the truth. Today, we're supposedly in a new era of UFO transparency, with the government acknowledging that unexplained aerial phenomena are real. But the declassified Project Blue Book files remind us that government admissions always come decades after the fact, and only after the evidence becomes impossible to deny. What are they investigating today that they'll finally admit to in 2050? What cases are being classified now at levels above the new UAP task force? The Project Blue Book files are available for anyone to examine. Thousands of pages of witness testimonies, radar data, physical evidence reports, and investigator notes. They document an undeniable pattern of encounters with objects that shouldn't exist according to our current understanding of physics and technology. They show a government caught between genuine uncertainty about what these objects are and determination to prevent public panic or acknowledge a phenomenon they don't understand and can't control. As we look to the future and hope for real transparency about UFOs, we should remember the lesson of Project Blue Book. When the government says they're investigating something seriously, ask yourself whether they're really seeking truth or just managing public perception. When they close a case with a conventional explanation that doesn't fit the facts, remember that institutional pressure to explain everything can be stronger than the commitment to find actual answers. The truth about UFOs, whatever it ultimately turns out to be, will likely be stranger and more complex than either the skeptics or believers imagine. The Project Blue Book files don't definitively answer the question of what these objects are or where they come from, but they prove beyond doubt that the question is real, the phenomenon is genuine, and the government has been lying about it for over 70 years. The files are declassified, the Navy videos are public, the Pentagon has admitted UFOs are real. Yet we're probably no closer to understanding the truth than we were in 1947 when Kenneth Arnold saw those 9 objects skipping across the sky near Mount Rainier. The difference now is that we know we've been lied to, and that knowledge changes everything.